Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we review official reports of firefighter line of duty deaths to learn from these and possibly prevent them in the future. I'm joined this week by Denis. Hello, Denis. How are you doing?
Hi, Paul. Glad to see you again. I've been away for a week or so on vacation, sort of a fall vacation. That's just my excuse to get out of town for a week. So,
hey, that's the problem when you retire, is you got to focus on those vacations.
yeah. I went to Cape Breton to Celtic Colors for a week, and just to see some performers and enjoy the colors because the trees are turning and the mountains and the sea and all the things that make Nova Scotia the best place to be.
There you go. I know. I loved Celtic Colors. We went.
Oh, did I mention the food?
And the food, yeah. We went in 2014 and we loved it. We'd love to go again. That was awesome. Yeah. Just so far away. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, start earlier.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh, boy. All righty. Well, I've been busy podcasting a little bit. I did an episode on my own there a few days ago and got that out. And here's the next one for October. As our listeners know, we try to do them in the month that they occurred. And they try not to do too many that are beyond 25, 26 years old, unless they're a significant event. This week, we're going to California. It covers an incident that occurred in October of 2003 in California. The information comes from the NIOSH report, which was F 2003-36. This occurred during the Cedar Fire, which was a significant wildland fire in California in 2003. And the victim in this case, the Cleveland National Forestry Monte Vista Ranger Unit in California who's the jurisdiction the fire was in. The line of duty death here, and there was significant injuries to a captain as well, but the firefighter that died was engineer Stephen Rucker of the Novato Fire Protection District. It was October 29th. Those late fall fires, those are the tricky ones. We're seeing more and more of those. Anyway.
And windy.
Yeah, windy.
Weather's changing, right? Seasons are changing. Can be quite variable, right?
Yeah, it is. That's right. It's just the way, and we're here in Alberta right now. Like, it's dry. We haven't had any significant rain since June. We had a low snowpack last year. It is so dry. Well, you're in Eastern Canada. You're dry as well, right? On the East Coast.
Yeah. In fact, I just saw something. I think it was across Canada. I just saw something about all kinds of boats and stuff on the St. Lawrence River. Down river from Lake Ontario are grounded. The water levels are 2 meters, which is almost 7 feet below normal water levels. And they're opening up a dam for 36 hours to lower Lake Ontario 1 foot to raise the St. Lawrence and there's several small lakes in between to try and raise that whole area 10 inches just to give everybody just a very brief window to get their boats out of the water, off the mud and out of the water before the water goes back down again. So that's how bad it is. This is the Great Lakes basin we're talking about.
Interesting. You and I both saw that this morning or yesterday on our feeds that they're releasing some water from Lake Ontario to increase the level. So so it's dry, and this is when these wildfires happen, and they can be very, very extreme behavior because of the dryness.
Yeah. So there's climate change is happening, folks. You can argue about why, but it's happening.
And the climate does change. It's always changed. So It's just changing when we're witnessing it.
Sure.
So, anyway, October 29th, 2003, 38-year-old male career firefighter was killed, and a 48-year-old male career captain was severely injured when fire overran their position. The incident occurred during the protection of a residential structure during wildfire operation that eventually consumed more than 280,000 acres. Now, structural protection is a very common a common tactic that's used, especially in the States, where they'll position resources and try to prevent the structure from igniting, and it can be risky, but these guys were very experienced. So this is kind of an odd thing that happened here, but it definitely can happen, and that's why we wanted to talk about it more so that people are aware of it moving forward.
Yeah, I really think the significance here, Paul, for a lot of our listeners who are structural firefighters, is the fact that we get involved in these situations where we defend structures or involved in wildland urban interface fires, and they're not really necessarily our bread and butter for most of us. And you always wonder, is it worth the risk to defend a structure versus, hopefully enough prevention has happened that you can come in later and just mop up and the structure's still there.
Yeah.
Do you put yourself between the fire and the structure? That's the question, right?
Well, the big thing is take the training, right? There's great training out there. In fact, IAFF is just rolling out across Canada, all across North America, wildland urban interface firefighting training for structural firefighters, and that's going on, here and there across Canada. You can go look on online for that. The S215 course, which is a course that's available across Canada as well, usually through forestry, is a great course as well. Obviously, 1041 or 1040 it's called now, which is the wildland firefighting for structural firefighters. Get the training so you have the knowledge, and make sure the officers get the training. That's the important part.
Yeah, but I think California has been way ahead of this curve for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've fires in the wildland urban interface are not a new thing out there.
That's for sure.
A lot of firefighters out there probably spend half their careers fighting wildland fires as well as other types of fires. So these guys certainly in this case were not poorly trained.
Exactly. So the victim's fire department, the fire department serves a population of approximately 60,000 in an area of approximately 71 square miles. So it's a fire protection district. We would call it a regional fire department here in Western Canada. The department has 5 stations, 70 uniformed firefighters. The victim's fire department is approximately 500 miles from the incident site. So they were out of their initial jurisdiction helping with this wildland fire. The victim was a California State Board certified firefighter level 1 and 2, a fire officer, a fire instructor, a driver operator, a first responder, and an emergency medical technician paramedic. The victim's wildland firefighter training consisted of National Wildfire Coordinating Group certified S130, 131, 190, which is firefighter training, advanced firefighter training, and introduction to wildfire behavior. S212, which is saws, power saws. S234, which is ignition operations for backfiring or burning out. S270, basic air, so you can work with the aircraft that are doing bucketing or drops. S290, intermediate wildland fire behavior, which is also a great course. ICS 200, so incident command, basic incident command, and ICS 300, advanced incident command, which I teach those. The victim had 18 years structural and wildland firefighting experience. So he was very well trained and experienced.
Not his first rodeo, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment and a little more about the personnel and their injuries. So there, on this particular fire, there were approximately 3,662 assigned firefighters at the time of the incident. So there would have been, more before and more after, and they rotate through, etc. Crews and equipment resources were assigned as follows. There were 35 single resources and 6 strike team hand crews. There were 48 single resource engines, 97 strike teams task forces, 12 single resource dozers, 27 water tenders, and 605 overheads, managers, supervisors, and analysts, and that kind of stuff. So the victim's crew was assigned to a task force that consisted of a task force leader and aide, a battalion chief with a battalion chief aide. And the victim was assigned to engine 6121, which is a Type 3 engine. And for those of you who are not familiar with Type 3 engines, with the different engine types, a Type 3 engine is often referred to as a wildland truck or brush truck. But it's not something on like an F450. It's not that at all. It's on more like a 6, 7, or 8 series truck. So like an FL70 Freightliner or something like that. And the basics of it are minimum 500-gallon water tank and a minimum 150 US gallon per minute pump. And they do carry equipment and they're pump and roll. So there's some of those types of features on those trucks, because specifically they are expected to work, wildfires. Essentially, that's kind of their point. So engine 6162 was a Type 3 engine, and the crew details with their injuries were: there was a captain who suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns affecting approximately 28% of his body, and respiratory burns to 30% of his lungs and upper airway, so significantly injured. The driver operator of the rig had some 1st and 2nd degree burns on his face, hands, and back. I remember these guys were probably wearing wildland equipment. I assume, do we find out later, Paul? I don't think so.
I don't think I saw that, what they were wearing for sure.
Yeah. So I think probably a modified wildland light structural type gear, which I often see these guys wearing. And there was another firefighter on the truck who suffered minor inhalation injuries and some 1st degree burns on face and back. And the engineer himself, the victim, who suffered fatal injuries. Also assigned on this task force was engine 5214, which was a Type 1 structural engine. The captain, driver, operator, and 2 firefighters. Also assigned was engine 24, which was another Type 1 structural engine, who had a captain, a driver, operator, and 2 firefighters. So 4-man crews, person crews, I should say. Then there was engine 334, which was another Type 3 wildland unit, had a captain, driver, operator, and 2 firefighters. And then also assigned on this was a federal fire department. So I'm not sure who the federal fire department would be. It's not CDF. I don't know who that is, Paul.
Could be forestry.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. They don't say here anyways.
Or a military base, or doesn't say.
Yeah, but it was a Type 1 structural engine, eh? So
yep.
Anyway, had a captain, driver, operator, and 2 firefighters. So for 16 firefighters in that task group, plus the engine that was run over, 6162. So the fire was under a unified command with the U.S. Forest Service, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CDF in other words, and with local governments. So these engines that came in from long distance were in support of these major agencies. So at the time of the incident, the weather, there was a strong onshore pressure gradient, so coming in off the ocean because it's California, that had developed sustained winds of 17 miles per hour. So that's 27 kilometers an hour sustained. That's pretty brisk. And had gusts up to 31 miles an hour, which is 50 kilometers an hour. And these were coming out of the west. And at approximately 1430 hours, the temperature was 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees C for those of us in the metric system. And there was a relative humidity of 30%. So not crossover conditions. The temperature wasn't high enough, but that's still significant fire weather going on right there.
Yeah, that's pretty dry, right? With that wind, especially.
It's particularly with a dry history prior to the fire, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so and these mutual aid fires, I mean, it's very common. I mean, during the Palisades fire last winter in the LA area, at one point, if I remember correctly, they had 15,000 emergency responders at the fire. Like they called fire departments from all over North America responded, including, as far as Wyoming. Canada sent water bombers and firefighting crews. So you do get these big groups working these fires and how to command them and stuff and working together, which is really cool. Yeah.
On this particular fire, even though I listed the engines involved, there were other resources. There were air resources, there were bulldozers on site, and there were basically other staff in like pickup trucks around too. So
yeah, like it said, there was 3,662 firefighters assigned to the fire. We're just talking this little area where this particular task or assignment was the 4 engines or 5 engines that we talked about. The incident description, and we'll elaborate here a bit on the report once we get into it, because we can see the maps, and we'll include the maps on socials and stuff like that as well. I'm trying to play with how we can do a video recording and show the pictures at the same time, and we may end up doing that here in the future. That would make it good for YouTube listeners anyway. It doesn't help the podcasters, so we need to explain it verbally. The incident site was a privately owned home situated on a ridge top that runs in the north-northeast direction. The incident site was a small segment of a much larger wildland fire that consumed approximately 280,000 acres and destroyed 2,232 residential structures, 22 commercial buildings, 656 outbuildings, damaging another 53 structures and 10 outbuildings. The Cedar Fire, you can look it up. There's YouTube videos on it and stuff like that. It's quite interesting. Another large wildland urban interface fire in North America, which, we're seeing around the world as the climate changes. The incident site was located on a ridge at an elevation of 3,800 feet, 400 feet above the bottom of the drainage of the coulee or the valley, with a west-facing slopes, which were ranging from 12 to 20%. So it's pretty steep slopes there to the west, where the fire was burning down in the valley. The vegetation, the fuel models in the immediate area of the incident site were fuel model 4 brush with at least 90% crown closure, so they had a lot of cover. The fuel model 1 grass, live fuel moisture values were below critical levels. So that's all the green up from spring was gone by October, and this stuff was ready to burn. Very low moisture levels, which can lead to extreme fire behavior, especially in the fine fuels, in the light stuff, the grass. That's what happened in Maui and Lanahai. That's what happened in many of these fires. The one in Palisades, same thing. It was January and it was windy, so it was dry. Fire behavior, there was a sustained run to the west-southwest directly to the incident site as the flanking fire established on the west-facing slope below the incident site where these houses were on the top of the ridge. Beautiful. You see all these beautiful homes out in the woods that have a beautiful look over the valley, and they are at risk of burning. There's lots of activity going on with that in North America right now, with trying to harden these homes so that if there is a wildfire, they can get burned over and the houses don't catch fire. So flame lights were calculated to be in excess of 78 feet. The fire line intensities in excess of 70,000, almost 74,000 BTU per foot second. Rates of spread were in excess of 16 miles an hour, so you can't outrun this fire. It's going fast. For the maximum wind speed recorded at 31 miles per hour, like 50K, right? 54K. The fire took a little over 2 minutes to travel from the bottom of the slope up the 400 feet to the top, a distance of about 0.46 miles. So almost almost quite a kilometer, right? All fuels, both dead and alive, were totally consumed below the incident site. And there's some pictures that we'll post that'll show that.
So we're going to talk now about the defensive operations that were taken on, and there was some backfiring or firing operations that took place. But I'm going to take a second, Paul, just to describe the picture a little better. So because when you're reading through this, it's difficult to get a picture in your mind, but I'm going to quickly draw you a visual picture that if as we said, these houses are on a ridge that ran northeast slightly. So if you're looking at a map of this, to your left, to the west, there's a valley. And this is the slope that comes up towards the homes that are on this ridge. And so the homes are kind of in a row on the ridge. You got residence 1 on the north, and residence 2, residence 3, and residence 4 as you work your way further south. There's also some outbuildings, and there's a storage barn that's just north of residence number 2. So between residence 1 and residence 2. And to the east of the ridge, it kind of goes into a bit of another small valley or plateau area, which was their safety zone. And there's an access road that runs up just to the east side of the ridge. So that's going to be kind of and that road's pretty straight, but there's long driveways that run into the homes. So that's kind of the picture that we're looking at here as you hear these descriptions. So when they're doing their firing operations, they're doing them to the west. So they're doing them essentially downslope from the homes. and somewhat between the homes to the south, right, where it's somewhat level between the homes. But the wind is behind this, remember? The wind is coming out of the west. So the wind is pushing your
backfiring
back.
is usually against the wind. You want to push against the wind to remove that fuel so these
That's
houses
right.
don't
Right.
ignite. So you would
That's right.
ignite near the homes and hope the fire will burn down towards the real fire.
Yeah.
Because the real fire is aggressive and big, it's drawing a lot of air. So you can actually light a fire in front of it and it'll suck it towards it. And that gets rid of that fuel. So then you have a less extreme fire at the
if it's
places
close.
you're trying to protect, if it's close enough.
But in this case, you got fairly high winds and your backfires are upslope. So the tendency for these backfires is to go in the same direction as the main fire. And I think that's actually somewhat what happens here. So the CDF, California Department of Forestry, FAE fire apparatus engineer, began firing out around the structure of residence number 1 while the CDF captain drove down a dirt road where he met up with engine 334. This is a little bit out of sequence and description out of the report, but these two California CDF firefighters are not on an engine. They're in a pickup truck, and they're somewhat independently assessing and taking action. And so that's what's going on. So anyway, he goes down towards engine 334 and instructs them to proceed up the road to the north to residence number 1 to support the firing operations. There's also 2 dozers and a hotshot crew that arrive at the north end of the dirt road, so up near residence number 1 or beyond it. And the 1 dozer and part of the hotshot crew start working near residence 1 and begin to establish a direct perimeter control in that area. So they're working probably around the west and north side. Engine 6162, which I remind you is the engine where the fatality is, begins clearing brush along the driveway to residence number 2. So they're south of these other operations we just described. So there's brush along the driveway that leads into residence number 2. That driveway leads in a southwesterly direction. So anyway, while the captain on the engine assesses the area around the structure. Although the captain did have concerns, probably there were some items there that could burn. After further assessment, he determined, and the crew determined, that the structure was defendable, and they decided to stay there and protect the structure. For residence number 3, which would be the third residence to the south, the CDF captain and the fire apparatus engineer arrive and begin firing out operations about 100 or 150 feet to the west of the structure. So this would be downslope. The FAE laid fire on the ground from south to the north. So he starts at the south end and heads north, shaped in an arc. He continued in a straight line from the top of the arc onwards towards the structure at residence 2. So they're lighting a continuous line on the windward side of this ridge and the downslope side. So this fire quickly spreads to the east, but was then knocked down by a bucket drop from a helicopter. The fire apparatus engineer discontinued his firing operations when he reached residence 3. So I guess he never got all the way up to residence 2. That may be a typo, Paul, I'm not sure, because he was heading north from residence 3. Anyway, residence 2, the CDF captain and FAE then drove their vehicle to residence number 2 and parked it near the garage. So they were in the north doing firing. They went south to residence 3, and then they went back up to residence 2 and stayed there. The captain then instructed the FAE to begin firing out from the garage at residence 2 toward the driveway and to then continue, so that would be to the south side of the residence, and then to continue in a northerly direction towards an unimproved lot that was south of residence number 1. So in other words, between the two, there's a gap where there is no house. The CDF captain and the captain of engine 6162 never made contact with each other. So the CDF captain who's out lighting these backfires and the captain of engine 6162 who's assigned to protect residence number 2, they never talk. The superintendent of the hotshot crew, which I remind you is up on the north end, while standing in a meadow with the safety zone, so he's northeast actually, he observes what he finds as an unexplained fire along the ridge between residences 3 and residences 2, and then between residences 2 and residences 1. He radios his crew, inform them they are not conducting fire operations, and he then orders them to retreat to the meadow, which is the safety zone. So these fires he's observing appear, I would say, to have been the backfiring operations. which hadn't been communicated to him, it would appear. So in the vicinity of Residence 4, which is the most southerly of the 4 residences, the CDF captain and the FAE, the apparatus operator, then drove south on the dirt road to Residence 4 from Residence 2, where they had been, where they then began another backfiring operation around the structures. That fire spread to the brush and also ignited an outbuilding. The fire intensified and then cut off the egress of engine 24, which was another engine assigned. They had been assigned by the task force leader to protect the structures. So lighting the backfire around residence number 4 was down where the only road leading in passed by. So this fire spread and cut off the road, which was the only access to the 4 structures. That's what happened.
Sounds a little uncoordinated for some reason, right?
Yeah, I think the events will prove so.
So the fire was initially reported on Saturday, October 25th at about 17:37 hours. Under the state's mutual aid system, a task force was established 2 days later to help combat the fire, which included the victim's engine, 4 other engines, and a task force leader. So that was the engines that Denis referred to earlier. The victim was assigned to engine 6162 of task force. Engine 6162 was dispatched at 21:30 hours, October 27th, so 2 days after the fire started, and headed for a rendezvous site with the task force leader and the 2 other engine crews, which is very common. They'll go meet somewhere, they'll go to a staging area. The task force leader and 3 engines left the rendezvous site, otherwise known as the staging area, at approximately 23:59 hours. A 3rd engine crew was also met en route. The crews drove the 500 miles to the incident base, where they arrived at approximately 1100 hours on the morning of October 28th. So they drove all night, it sounds like. The force was in the staging area approximately 3 hours before receiving an assignment. At 1400 hours, they got an assignment. So through the incident command system, they were assigned to a task, a work task, and they were given that at 1400 hours to provide structure protection. A 5th engine, a Type 1, which is a city-type structural engine, crew was assigned to them at this time. The task force worked with a number of crews providing structure protection until they were relieved to return to the incident base at 21:30 hours that day. The next day, October 29th, the task force leader attended the morning briefing at 0700. The crew was assigned to a branch and division on a flank of the fire. The task force leader met with the division supervisor at this time for any additional instructions and information. The task force leader then met with his crews, briefed them on their assignment before proceeding to the rendezvous point about 40 miles from the staging area, where they would meet up with the rest of the division. The task force arrived at the rendezvous site and was assigned to provide structure protection. The task force leader then received a map and debriefing from a strike team leader that had been working the area previously. The firefighters reported to the NIOSH investigators that the fire at this time was moving slowly with spot fires on both sides of the state road. The crews began mopping up operations in a small subdivision on the south side of the road before receiving the new assignment at 1100 hours.
So it's interesting when you read this, you can see the size of the organization that's behind this whole fire complex, which is what it is. And these are guys, firefighters, and crews from the fire departments who would probably the only time in their life they'll ever see each other. They're not going to work together on a regular basis. So without a really good organizational structure and everybody following standard SOPs and incident command and communications protocols, you could never make this work. And so that's why having these systems in place is essential for these massive incidents, which is what this was.
This is why incident command training and exercises are essential. That's why the system was invented in the 70s, because of big fires in the Los Angeles areas where they had all the resources they needed, but they didn't manage them effectively. And that's the whole idea, is how do you manage these massive, what did it say, 3,600 firefighters on this fire? Yeah.
Imagine them all out freelancing on their own.
Right. Yeah. We'd have a lot more line of duty deaths, unfortunately.
Yeah. Although there does appear to have been a little freelancing going on in this incident.
Yes. Yes.
Might have been a factor.
Span of control, maybe, or something. So at approximately 11:50, the pilot of helicopter 523 noticed a spot fire near Residence 1, in the case the residences these guys are protecting. The helicopter operation was then moved to the ridge on the east side of the drainage, where they were assigned to protect structures. The task force leader arrived at the ridge and begins to size up the structures, beginning at Residence 1. At approximately the same time, California Department of Forestry CDF captain and a fire apparatus engineer arrived on the ridge in a pickup truck, utility 3334, to drive to Residence 1. So these are the ones that Denis was talking about previously, the CDF guys with the pickup truck, and they're running around looking at stuff and doing some backfires.
Right. So at approximately 1200 hours, most of the crews had arrived at the ridge where they would be providing structure protection. So remember, most of these engines, there were 5 or 6 of them, I forget the exact number, are mostly structural engines, type 1 engines, although 2 of them are type 2 engines, or type 3 engines, pardon me, I misspoke there. But there's not a massive amount of water on any of these trucks, right? So the main strategy is handwork, essentially, right? You're not going to sit there and dose a structure and protect it with 500 gallons of water. That's probably not the main strategy. Anyway, around 1200 hours, most of the crews had arrived at the ridge, where they would be providing structure protection. 4 homes and a barn, mostly. The single lane dirt road runs along the east side of and parallel to the ridge top, as I had mentioned earlier. There is a large open field to the east, which was designated as a safety zone. Remember, the fire's coming from the west and the north. There were 4 separate residences, residence number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there was a water tower near resident number 1, and a storage barn along the east side of the road between residence 1 and residence 2. The task force leader determined that he was going to red flag resident 1 and residence 3 as he deemed them not savable. So I guess red flagging in this case means not savable, or, essentially.
We'll talk about this a little later, but yeah. So he's done structural triage. Here is what he's doing,
Basically.
and he's deciding that these 2 residences are not, either the driveway's too narrow, there's nowhere to turn around, the trees are overgrowing the building, whatever. They're not savable in that it doesn't make sense to waste time trying to protect them because they're too dangerous for the firefighters, or there's no way they'll have the time before the fire gets there to make them unburnt, not to protect them.
Yeah. Or simply, within the resources that he has, he needs to concentrate them on better prospects for saving. So he essentially red flags residence 1, which is the one at the north end, and residence 3, which is not the full way down, but further down. So Engine 334 was not with the task force at that time because they had headed into the nearest community in search of a hydrant to refill their engine's water tank. I'm not sure how far away that would be. It's not on the maps that are part of the report, so it's a ways. The task force leader drove to the end of the single lane road, to the north, in other words, to conduct his size up in determining where to deploy his crew. So he would have been on the ridge line to the north of the 4 structures. The CDF FAE, fire apparatus engineer, begins firing out around residence 1, while this captain, the CDF captain, proceeds in the utility 3444 down the dirt road towards the south. So he leaves his fire apparatus engineer alone doing a backfiring around residence 1. At approximately 12:15 hours, engine 6162, which is the victim's engine, was assigned to protect residence number 2. And this is where the incident where he loses his life. And also engine 24 was assigned to protect residence number 4, the last one in the chain to the south. Engine 5214 was staged at the storage barn along the east side of the road, so that would be between residences 1 and 2. So I guess staged could go north, could go south, whatever. A hotshot crew and 2 bulldozers then arrive at residence 1 with part of the hotshot crew and one of the bulldozers then beginning direct perimeter control of that area. So engine 6162 crew proceeded up the driveway of their residence while the victim and a fellow crew member cleared. So we got some stuff going on at residence 4, stuff going on at residence 2, stuff going on at residence 3. There's stuff going on at all 4 of them, basically. So engine 6162 went down the driveway to residence 2, and and the FAE who lost his life and the fellow crew members cleared overhanging brush near the driveway. So there's brush hanging over the driveway. So this is a well-grown out property, at least on the east side. The driver positioned engine 6162 approximately 60 feet to the south of the structure. Presumably this is an area where he felt the truck was not likely to be burned over. Engine 334 crew was staged at the storage barn, so that's up the road between residence 1 and 2, when the CDF captain, which is the same one who met with the task force leader, approached the captain of 334. CDF captain informed him that he had already begun a burnout operation near residence 1, and that if they didn't get up there soon, they would lose the structure. Engine 334 captain then radioed the task force leader, remember who's at the north end, for further instructions. The task force leader then ordered them to head up to residence 1 to see what they could do. Remember, this residence had been red flagged. So the task force leader proceeded down the driveway to the dirt road heading towards the storage barn. So he decided to come down and meet 334, I guess, when he saw bulldozers heading towards the north end of the ridge and residence 1. So task force leader does not appear to be in charge of the bulldozer crew, so not sure where the disconnect there is. The captain of engine 6162, which is the victim's engine, determined that their site at residence number 2 was defensible because there was a large cleared area, approximately 150 feet of brush cleared around the west side of the structure, so the downhill side. So the engine 6162 crew had a pretty clear view of the west and the northwest. Tall brush and drifting smoke obscured their view to the southwest. So they observed smoke from the fire to the north, which was flanking towards them, so growing flank-wise, not head-wise, and posed the greatest threat to their position. Small runs of fire were taking place across the canyon on the west side of the drainage. So it was spotting across the canyon, across the valley on the west side, which would have been upwind. The crew also noted an up canyon and upslope wind at about 7 to 10 miles per hour. The crew then decided they would clear the grass and brush manually and with fire that was below the house and blocking them to the south, I guess. So 2 firefighters from engine 6162's crew were now using drip torches to burn out the grasses below residence 2. The victim manned a 1.5-inch hand line while he was burning a brush pile that was fairly close to the engine. And the captain was using a drip torch to burn out the vegetation near the driveway. So they're trying to improve the clear space around the residence number 2. Fire could be seen to the north and west of their position, as I mentioned, and there were 3 helicopters making bucket drops in that area. At approximately 12:25 hours, so 25 minutes after they got there, CDF captain and FAE arrived in a pickup truck and then began lighting a fire near the garage of this home, but they never spoke with the captain of the engine 6162. So they arrived, set a backfire, and then left.
Kind of wonder if there's a bit of jurisdictional peeing on posts here or something.
I don't know. It boggles my mind. Now, mind you, 6162 was not near the garage. They're down at the south end of the property.
I guess so.
So they're not right there. Maybe they didn't see them. I don't know. But in my experience, you don't light backfires unless you have some means of controlling them immediately to hand. So I'm not sure what the theory there is. Anyway, the captain from engine 6162 saw the CDF captain and firefighter and believed that they had seen him near the house. Approximately 15 minutes later, the crew noticed fire activity below them was beginning to increase. So below them would have been towards the west, downslope towards the valley. So maybe one of those spot fires on the other side had come across. Something was going on. Maybe one of the backfires being set. So the task force leader was coming down the driveway after red flagging residence 3. We're no longer at residence 2, we're now at residence 3, where he ran into the CDF captain and the firefighter that we had seen earlier at residence 2.
No, we're back at 2. It's just that he's on his way back. He's at residence 2.
Right. He'd been to 3 and he was on his way back.
Yeah, right. And then he ran into the CDF captain and the firefighter that had been seen earlier.
So thank you. Anyway, the CDF captain told the task force leader that they needed to put some fire on the ground or they're going to lose the houses. Okay, I'm not sure who's in charge of this fire. The CDF captain and the firefighter carrying a drip torch headed into the bush just to the north of Residence 3. The task force leader reported to NIOSH investigators that then there were flames 10 to 15 foot tall could be seen in the brush just minutes after the CDF captain and firefighter entered the brush. CDF captain and firefighter then came out of the brush, got into the truck, so this is the CDF FAE, and drove away without any further conversations with the task force leader. Wow. I'm not sure what happened there.
Engine 6162 crew began to observe an increase in fire activity downslope from the location as the fire was now making an up canyon upslope run in the heavy brush and oak fuels. The fire was wind-driven and was making a continuous run towards residence number 2, covering a distance of approximately 1/2 mile in 2 minutes. The Engine 6162 crew gathered behind their engine as fire intensity increased. The victim manned the 1.5-inch hose line at the rear of the apparatus, while another firefighter manned a hose line at the front.
Remember, they only got 500 gallons on board.
Yeah. The firefighter on the hand line at the front of the apparatus had to extinguish the juniper bushes on the patio behind them as hot embers began blowing into the brush near the residential structure. Conditions were beginning to deteriorate quickly as the smoke began reducing visibility and the heat intensified. The crew members reported to NIOSH investigators that the sky began to glow orange and that the heat appeared to be coming from the south or the southwest behind them. There was a significant increase in the wind as a flame front blew across the driveway and near the garage, cutting off their escape route. The ornamental brushes between engine 6162 and the house began to burst into flames, so perhaps the defensible claim may have been marginal on this structural triage. It's hard to know, right? The captain ordered the crew to seek refuge inside the residential structure. The firefighter, driver, operator ran for the patio that led to the rear of the structure, broke out a window at the back door, and reached inside to unlock it. The captain noticed that the victim was not following them. He turned back to look for the victim, who was still standing near the rear of the apparatus, and noticed that the victim appeared to be disoriented. The captain yelled for the victim to move into the structure. The victim was slow to respond to the captain's order and actually appeared to begin walking in the opposite direction. The captain continued to yell to the victim before the victim turned and began walking towards the captain.
You know, this, you look at this and you say, what do you mean disoriented? You know, but I've been in heavy smoke like that, not intentionally, got there. And it's very easy to become disoriented. It's also hard to breathe. And your brain starts going towards thoughts of, wow, how do I get out of this? What's the best way out? And you may not necessarily be listening to people yelling at you or even understand what direction that's coming from. And you got to recognize that these fires make a hell of a lot of noise. And so it's a very loud environment as well as hot and smoky.
This sort of happened to me one time when I was about 10 years old. We had a sailboat, as you know, and I had a friend who we were staying on the sailboat for the week. It was, docked in the marina, and the friend and I were playing with the dinghy, the rowboat, and for some reason, my friend, who I didn't know if he could row or not, he was in the dinghy and I was on the dock, and he became untied, and the dinghy kind of moved away from the dock, and I jumped in to get him to grab the rope, but for some reason I panicked. I knew how to swim. I was an excellent swimmer when I was like 9-10 years old, so there was no reason to panic, but I did. And then this guy's yelling, my friend, of course, and then either a brother or my mom or somebody on the boat heard the commotion and came out and fished me out of the drink. But there was absolutely no reason for me to panic because I could swim like a fish. I was always swimming all summer. So, you get this all of a sudden panic, something surprised this guy. He's in the smoke. He's disoriented. Who knows, and they're in a totally different environment, even though he's an experienced firefighter. And they got fires going on all around. There's commanders going back and forth that are doing stuff independently. I can understand it.
Yeah. And the products of combustion, the smoke, the carbon monoxide, everything else, it affects your decision-making ability. Sure. It absolutely does. And one of the only ways to protect yourself against this is to train and basically to be calm and to make decisions, even when it's difficult to do so.
And he had been extinguishing a brush pile before too, so he might have got a couple of big snootfuls of brush pile smoke, right?
Yeah, he may have already been exposed. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll learn some more here. So the victim only took a couple of steps before he fell to the ground. The victim was able to stand back up under his own power before he turned and walked towards the tailboard of the apparatus. The victim then turned and fell into the burning bushes, ornamental shrubs planted by the homeowner near the patio. The captain grabbed the victim, assisted him towards the structure. The victim was moving under his own power, but appeared to the captain to be slightly hunched over at the waist. So, I mean, it could be a medical emergency. No, we don't know, right? We're going to find out more later, but these things can happen at the worst times. That's why you always want to have another reserve engine in reserve somewhere. So if somebody gets hurt or something breaks down, you can call them in to replace. The captain
and so many times, Paul. Even in structure fires, the order comes to evacuate or vacate the structure, and not everybody leaves at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you haven't physically grabbed onto the guy next to you and walked out, and people get outside and they turn around and they go, well, where's the other guy?
Exactly.
He was with me, but he's not, and so this is a parallel situation here.
Yeah, we've had lots of those in this podcast, right?
Many.
The captain heard the victim reply that I'm burning up, but the captain did not see any visible fire on the victim. The victim fell for the final time as he and the captain reached the patio along the south wall of the residential structure. The victim fell to his knees and landed face down without any attempt on his part to brace his fall. The victim was unresponsive, so unconscious right away. Wow. Captain attempted to move him. The captain made a radio transmission stating that he had a firefighter down. It was at this time the captain began receiving the majority of his burn injuries. The captain dropped his portable radio as it became too hot to hold. He may not have had gloves, right? They might have just been in wildland gear, so there's no thermal protection. It just won't ignite is the only thing that wildland gear gives you. It's Nomex or similar, but there's no thermal barrier. It was forced to retreat to the rear of the structure where he was met by his firefighter and his driver operator. Fire was now reportedly blowing over the patio with such intensity that no further attempts to find and assist the victim were feasible. The captain, the firefighter, and the driver operator sought refuge in the house. Terrible to be stuck there, now he can't get him. The additional attempts were made to look for the victim, but the intense heat forced the crew members back inside the structure. The driver operator was eventually able to make it to the engine, where he grabbed a hand line and attempted to extinguish fire on the patio, where he could see the victim lying face down. He quickly ran out of water as the hose at the rear of the engine had burned through and the tank had been pumped dry. The driver operator went back inside the structure that was now burning with the interior filling with smoke. They decided to make a run for the engine, where they were able to escape as the driver operator drove engine 6162 down the driveway onto the single-lane dirt road. They proceeded south along the dirt road, where they met up with a hotshot crew. At approximately 1310 hours, advanced life support ambulances and medical helicopters were requested. The captain, firefighter, and driver operator were transported via various helicopters to County Burn Center for treatment. The victim's body was recovered from the scene the same day.
Imagine getting in the truck and driving away, leaving one behind.
I can't even imagine it.
No. I mean, the captain was severely injured also, and one other guy was, and they all had smoke inhalation, but leaving one of your crew members behind, pretty certain he's dead, and just driving away, wow. That's hard on the head.
Yeah.
Anyway, crews from the task force that were operating to the south and to the north of the incident site reported that they too had experienced extreme fire behavior at approximately the same time as the fatal event. So probably wind, right? The Engine 334's crew that were assigned to Residence 1 and Engine 24's crew that had been assigned to Residence 4 also reported experiencing a very similar situation to that at Engine 6162's crew. Their escape routes had been temporarily cut off as the intensity of the fire from the firing out operations increased. Engine 334's crew reported to the task force leader that their visibility was extremely limited and that there were numerous spot fires in their area. The 334 crew was able to use hand lines to protect themselves, while CDF helicopters made bucket drops on the fire and a dozer cut a line, increasing their defensible space. They eventually were able to escape without serious injuries. So near thing for a couple of the other crews as
Yeah,
well.
so near miss for the other crews in the same area, basically.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a watch out situation. It's a windy day. You're upslope, lots of fuels. I mean, this is a very, very close call risk to operate in this area. They had a safety zone, but it was a little ways away. It wasn't like across the road. You had to drive up the long driveway to get to the road to get to the safety zone.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mention anything about lookouts, so they may not have had a good lookout that could tell them to watch out. There's no good position for a lookout.
Yeah. Plus, there appeared to be some uncoordinated activities occurring. So
That too.
The task force commander did not appear to be in command of everything that was going on at that fire.
That's right. Recommendation number 1. Fire departments and fire service agencies should ensure the authority to conduct firing or burning out operations is clearly defined in standard operating procedure or incident action plan, and that it is closely coordinated with all supervisors, command staff, and adjacent ground forces. And this is exactly what we've been saying, is that people didn't know what other people were doing, and they were going ahead with stuff without talking to the people that were working in that same area. In the discussion, it says it may be advantageous or necessary to conduct firing or burnout operations in certain areas during a fire. Absolutely. It's a great tool, especially if you're, in front of the fire or on the flank. It's a great way to increase the protection, right? Each and every firefighter must be assigned to a team of 2 or more to be given specific assignments when conducting such an operation. Firing out operations, that one CDF guy, he just left his guy doing it on his own. You never know. You can trip and fall. Anything could happen, right? Firing out operations is a way of attacking the very intense fire. Burning out is used to widen control line by eliminating unburned fuels between the control line and the advancing fire front. Any firing out or burning out operation requires considerable preparation, organization, and coordination. Examples of safety guidelines pertinent to this incident. Firing operations should be supervised by qualified personnel. They should be coordinated with incident command and crews operating in the area. Firing operations should be done by trained personnel that have the authorization from their supervisor and command. Constant radio communication must be maintained so firing operations can be coordinated with other fire line operations. It's kind of like ventilation in a structure fire, right? We're gonna light the fire more for you when we open this window. Are you ready? Escape routes and safety zones should be identified and clearly marked before starting firing or burnout operations. If firing out becomes too intense for crews to control, it should be stopped until control is regained and the firing operation is modified to reduce the intensity. Firing operations should be initiated from and terminated from an anchor point, and their anchor point was questionable if the juniper bushes were burning up around them. That's you want a good anchor point.
So, you have to ask yourself, so why did the firing out operations take place? And when I read the narrative here, I kind of get the impression that the CDF captain felt that they were going to lose these structures if they didn't do their firing out operations. So they had to do those right away. And so we had to get that done. So let's get that done. And so all of these steps that would be necessary to make it safe, according to the SOPs, were all going to waste time, and we needed to get it done. So I don't know that that's what happened, but I get that impression. And I think as officers, we've all been at fires, and we've all seen things and go, I got to do something here. And there's a very short time span. It's got to be done. Yeah. And I got to do it. There's no time for running around telling people what I'm going to be doing or coordinating or going to ask the boss, can I do this or whatever? The window of opportunity is gone. But when, if you decide to freelance, which is what you're doing, if you decide to freelance, you need to be fully aware of the consequences of your freelancing activities. And I would say that if you're not communicating adequately and totally and not going through command, you are not aware of the consequences because you can't know what everybody else is doing, not like the incident commander does. So I think this recommendation all goes to preventing that type of a situation from occurring, which appears to have occurred here.
Yep, exactly.
Hard to say.
No, I've done that. I've done, stepped in. I didn't agree with what command was doing. And I was also an equal rank. And so I just went in and did my own thing. And it wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. I won't evaluate it on. I won't expand on it too much. But
recommendation 2, fire departments and fire service agencies should ensure that all resources, especially those operating at or near the head of the fire, are provided with current and anticipated weather information. So remember, these guys were on the flank of the fire, but somehow the fire got to the west of them through spotting and possibly through the burnout operations. And then they became no longer on the flank, they were more on the head. And that's what happened here. So you need to be aware, because weather, wind directions can change, intensities can change, and you had upslope and up valley conditions here. So lots of reasons why you need to have good lookouts and predictability. Anyway, a fire weather watch indicates a possible critical fire weather pattern, i.e., which is a condition fire weather watch. I.e., there might be strong winds, dry lightning, a dry cold front, low relative humidity. Remember, these wildland fires, they're not like an afternoon event. They're multi-day, multi-season sometimes. So a lot of stuff can change as the fire goes on. A spot weather forecast should be requested for fires that have potential for extreme fire behavior and that exceed the initial attack or are located in areas for which a fire weather watch or red flag warning has been issued. Of course, you need to recognize that the risk is there before you can take these steps. You need to recognize that. So a fire weather watch had been issued at 0900 hours for this fire on the day of the incident. The victim's crew was not aware of the fire weather watch issued earlier that day and not provided, with a spot weather forecast. You got to wonder if the task force commander was aware either, because they had their briefing that morning. They talked. What did they talk about? The coffee?
Yeah, they
the
should have been.
No,
they
must have talked about that stuff.
The fire weather watch would warn them to extreme fire behavior, to watch out because things could change rapidly. And that's exactly what happened. Is they got caught in a rapid change upslope from a fire,
So they might have made a different decision, like up a one-lane dirt road on a ridge, downwind of an uphill slope, severely dry conditions, wind, fire weather watch on the day. They might have said, you know what, those 4 houses aren't worth the risk. So they might have changed their entire strategy.
And if they were backfiring or burning out at Residence 3, which was southwest a little bit,
and upwind,
southwest, basically upwind from Residence 2, that's the question that I have: is did the fire start at Residence 3 and run to Residence 1 and catch these guys? Recommendation number 3, fire departments and fire service agencies should stress the importance of using LCES, which in Canada we use LACES, so we add an A in there. So lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones, and in Canada we add anchor point. So lookouts, anchor points, communications, escape routes, and safety zones. They didn't have a lookout as far as I can tell. They could see where they were. The anchor point was maybe not big enough, and the safety zone was too far away. To help,
and communications apparently were in that.
And the communications were very impeded between the various units. To help identify specific trigger points, examples such as extreme fire behavior, changes in weather, location of the fire on the ground, and to indicate the need for a crew to use their escape routes and to seek refuge in a designated safety zone. The discussion on this one is: in the wildland fire environment, lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones are key safe procedures for firefighters. The elements of LCES form a safety system used by firefighters to protect themselves. LCES is a self-triggering mechanism that allows the lookout to continuously assess and reassess the fire environment and to communicate those threats to the fellow crew members.
So another factor here is you've got 4-person crews. So you've got 2 working in pairs, right? You're working in pairs. Where's your lookout? Where's your 5th person for the lookout? You don't have a 5th person. It's not in the crew. So is the captain going to be the lookout? Is another member of the crew going to be assigned to the lookout? So that leaves 1 person working on their own, or 3 people working together. And there's a lot of stuff to be done here. I won't say they're running around, but they're moving quickly, trying to get as many steps to protect this property as they can get done. And some of these factors in LACES got dropped, I think. Single crew, all there by themselves.
Well, but where were all the other units? Like, there was no one overlooking. I think they said the TF commander was in the safety area, maybe. but he probably
Yeah,
couldn't
there were considerable
see where
distances
they
between
were.
these properties.
Yeah, they couldn't see where they
Yeah.
were. Yeah.
You're not looking from one to the other and seeing the other crew. That's
No,
not happening. Anyway, recommendation number 4. Fire departments and fire service agencies should ensure that at a minimum, high-risk geographical areas are identified, through the topography, certain fuels, property, is a property combustible, non-combustible, protected, non-protected, that type of a thing, all as part of the pre-planning process, and that information is provided to assigned crews. And these are individual residences. There's no pre-plans were happening here. And the captain got on site and did a very quick assessment of what he thought he could accomplish there. So pre-incident plans are guidelines that are intended to assist fire officers in establishing priorities and making fireground decisions. Pre-incident plans should be reviewed at least annually and updated as needed. Copies of pre-incident plans should be made available to all assigned crews. For this incident, none of the officers or fire officers assigned to the task force had ever fought a wildland fire in this region of California. Fire history, fuels, weather, topography, and crew training experience varies throughout the state. This creates a situation where crews may be unfamiliar with local factors affecting fire behavior and is listed as one of the 18 watch-out situations. Are you all familiar? I don't think we're going to get into those here, but if you're not a wildland firefighter or at least experienced with that, you really need to look up these watch-out factors. They're not complicated, but you don't want to miss any of them either.
They're covered
Anyway,
in
this
that.
taught.
They're covered in that wildland firefighter training course that I just taught a few weeks ago. So if you've got,
you can Google it.
You can Google it. It's out there.
Yeah, Google it and compare it to this story to see which ones got missed. We're not going to get into that, but it's instructive. Anyway, it should be taught to all wildland firefighters, so they would have an unfamiliarity with weather and local factors influencing fire behavior, such as gusting winds, sudden wind directional changes due to canyons and weather fronts and so forth. And they were all identified as contributing factors in wildland firefighter fatalities in the past. There's been many. The CDF, California Department of Forestry, Green Sheet and the report produced by the victim's fire department both pointed out that an incident involving the deaths of 11 firefighters occurred less than 1.5 miles to the southwest of this particular site and under very similar weather conditions in November of 1957. So before the living memory of most of the people involved in this particular incident, but should never have been before their knowledge memory. This information was not available to the victim and his crew before the fire.
Yeah,
man, you got to learn. You got to learn your stuff.
That's why we do the podcast, right?
That's why, indeed.
I don't remember 1957, but I know you do.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. Let's see. Recommendation number 5. Fire departments and fire service agencies should ensure incident command system ICS span of control recommendations are maintained. Span of control refers to the number of personnel reporting to any given individual. The optimum span of control in the incident command system is 5, with an acceptable spread of 2 to 7. On a situation that is not yet under control, no one operating under ICS should have more than 5 personnel reporting to him or her. This incident can be best described as a fast-moving, complex incident that would have required tight span of control. The span of control at the division level on this incident was 27 to 1. My goodness, 27 to 1. This exceeded the acceptable ratios as outlined by ICS. So many of these podcasts that we have done, span of control is a key factor. The 3 firefighters that died in Baltimore is a perfect example. It was a similar span of control. And that's why you have these problems, is everybody was just running around without adequate supervision and knowing what was going on. So I'll get off my ICS soapbox now, but 27 to 1 is definitely asking for disaster.
Yeah. That 1957 fire was actually in 1956. It was in the Cleveland National Forest and included some inmate firefighters as were involved in the team at the time. I just Googled it just to haul it up. It's not the one I thought it was, so I take back my comments on that. There is, but definitely looks to be something to be learned from that. Recommendation number 7 is where we are, Paul, I think.
Yep.
State agencies local municipalities and community organizations should consider developing statewide guidelines and local community plans for managing fuels in the wildland urban interface. This fire happened 22 years ago. So I think there's been a lot of progress in these areas
We're
since
still fighting it.
this fire and
That's
report. I
we're
said
still
there, not
fighting it.
here.
I mean,
They're not here.
California. So after the Palisades fire, the
Yeah,
governor of
yeah,
California demanded that CDF did new wildland urban interface zone maps, and within those zones, they are enforcing hardening and fire smart or fire wise
yeah,
practices in those areas. So it's 22 years later, and we're still battling the same thing: junipers on the patio. It's getting
yeah,
better, but we're not there yet. How about
yeah,
Halifax, right? Same problem.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, the difference here is I don't think residents in this area are as aware that what they like could put their lives at risk.
Right,
And I mean, there's a few in this area, some 15,000 people that are pretty aware, but the balance of the million people aren't. so
right, exactly.
so
Yeah.
you
I
gotta
mean, you
so you
you
gotta
were
ask
aware,
yourself.
you were
Yeah,
aware, and you fire smarted your home, and it survived
I
the
know.
burnover,
That's
whereas the
correct. It did.
neighbors didn't.
Yeah. Um, so anyway, you're making plans to deal with wildfire zones. These plans have got to be living documents. Trees
Yes.
grow. 20 years, you can grow a
Yep.
pretty good sized tree. Bush grows back in a year or two. People are bulldozing the forest and putting in houses. And I see it all around me. It's happening everywhere, California in particular, and other Western states. They build houses on top of ridges because it's a nice view. It's
Yep.
just nice breezes and everything else. It's the worst possible place to put a house from a wildfire protection point of view. Well, maybe not the worst possible, but it's pretty bad. So
Yeah.
there's all these issues, and but governments seem to allow them to do it. So it's an odd thing. Anyway, a number of organizations at the state and national levels provide community leaders and citizens with guidelines that can be utilized in identifying specific threats to life and to property, i.e., from wildfires. Best practices and available resources. This was written 22 years ago. Could have been written yesterday. The incident site occurred in a community that was identified and designated by the California Fire Alliance as having a hazard code level 3, indicating the highest fire threat level. The surrounding communities also had a hazard code level 3. So did my community, by the way. So they knew before this fire we had here that it was at extreme risk of having a fire. And we were right. These communities are in the process of establishing a committee to deal with the threat of a wildfire when this incident occurs. So they are already aware, they were already established a committee to take steps, but the incident occurred. The homeowners of residence number 2 had cleared a large portion of the wildland brush in all directions surrounding their house, but still not completely, obviously. Approximately 70 feet of brush had been cleared to the east, 180 feet to the west, 100 feet to the south, and 115 feet to the north of the house. There was extensive management of the landscape vegetation and grounds surrounding the incident site that consisted of a mix of herbaceous plantings, basically green foliage, a juniper hedge near the patio where the victim was found, small woody shrubs, a few small fruit trees, and large diameter oak trees, all of which can burn under the correct conditions, right? But things, the juniper would be the particularly dangerous one of those,
Yep.
I would
Yep.
suggest.
No, the zero zone in the fire smart firewise. Nothing combustible within the first 5 feet of the home. That's the most important part.
Yeah, yeah, that's 5 meters, Paul, isn't it?
Nope, 5 feet.
Okay,
Nothing
pretty
combustible. So
close.
no wood chips, no
Yeah,
junipers, no stacked
yeah,
corded wood, etc.
yeah. Way too close, in my
Uh,
opinion.
Fire departments and fire service agencies should provide members with annual medical evaluations consistent with NFPA 1582, Standard on Occupational Health and Medical Program for fire departments. This is recommendation 8. Sorry, I forgot, jumped into it here. The affected fire department had already implemented a comprehensive annual medical evaluation. Good for them. In addition, the victim's personal physician appropriately shared medical information. He was diagnosed with asthma with a fire department physician.
Now, I was just going to say um, that was probably a big factor.
Could be, could be. It talks about that later on in the report, I think. But with the fire department physician, but not with other fire department or city officials. So no one else on the department may have known. The fire department physician, employed by a health maintenance organization under contract to the fire department, assessed whether his condition could affect the victim's ability to safely perform the job. Specifically, they noted the victim never required any of the following for his asthma: hadn't been hospitalized, no emergency medical care, no oral corticosteroids, so a puffer or anything, or work restrictions. In addition, the normal had normal physical fitness tests as described in the medical findings section. So he was fit otherwise, but he did have an underlying condition.
Yes, might have been an impairment there under the right conditions, right? And these are severe conditions.
Yeah, extreme.
I mean, like I said, I don't have asthma, but I've been caught in a burn over and severe smoke, and you just can't breathe.
Oh yeah, it catches you. You can't do a thing.
Nope. I mean, yeah. I mean, you get the best breath you can, you hold it, and you try to go as far as you can. It's not easy. Anyway, recommendation number 9. Standard setting bodies such as the NFPA, NWCG, etc., should consider developing a national standard that firefighters can utilize during wildfire incidents for identifying and marking wildland-urban interface properties based on the ability to defend the structure located on that property. You'd have to do it annually, wouldn't you?
Well, every 5 years or so.
Yeah, a structure triage checklist or assessment sheet is an invaluable tool when evaluating identifying structures and can be successfully protected during a wildland fire incident. The evaluation, which is essentially a triage of a structure by an officer, preferably a wildland urban interface protection specialist, is but one part of the size-up process when determining if a structure can be protected from an approaching wildland fire. The safety of firefighters must be a primary consideration when evaluating whether a structure can be successfully protected. There are 3 categories of structures: those that are not threatened, those that are hopeless or too dangerous to protect, and those that will be threatened and have a potential for being saved. So in other words, ones that are fine, ones that are hopeless, and ones that work might save. Determining which category a structure will fall into should be based upon a logical process of determining anticipated fire behavior, estimating the capabilities and availability of resources, and analyzing the defensible space around the structure. My comment is that I don't know that it's reasonable to expect a fire department to protect any structure under any conditions. I don't think that's a reasonable thing, and I don't think the public should expect that. I believe that if you're a private homeowner, you need to take the steps that you can take to protect your property. You really need to do that.
I think that the structural triage officer in this case may have been fooled by the clearing. So this particular structure, different than the others in this neighborhood, had cleared, almost 100 feet all around the structure. So that made it look fairly safe. They didn't know about the weather watch, the red flag, so the extreme fire behavior warning, and he probably didn't take into account all the little combustible bushes and junipers and stuff really close to the home when he did the triage, saying, hey, we got space here, we could protect it. And then they were overcome by the smoke. So, that's probably what happened here. And then, of course, the span of control thing, so that no one warned them because they didn't know what everybody was doing.
Right. So you got 100 foot of clear space and 75 foot flame length from the top of the trees.
Yeah, exactly. What I didn't include here was recommendation 6, which I'll just go over it briefly here because it dealt with the health of the firefighter in the NIOSH report. So they talk about fire departments and fire service agencies should consider the implementation of a carbon monoxide-based monitoring program for firefighters. Crew members reported that the victim reacted in a confused, disoriented manner during critical minutes as the fire approached. Hypoxia, the reduction of oxygen in the blood or tissues, can cause altered mental states, and the victim had 2 potential reasons for hypoxia: carbon monoxide poisoning and/or severe asthma. An asthma attack of sufficient severity to cause hypoxia typically is preceded by symptoms of respiratory distress, such as shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, chest tightness, etc. According to his crew members, the victim did not display any of these symptoms. NIOSH medical investigators considered asthma as an unlikely cause due to the lack of symptoms coupled with the victim's relatively mild underlying asthma. Hypoxia, though, due to carbon monoxide poisoning, is a much more likely scenario. Although wildland fires generally do not expose firefighters to high levels of carbon monoxide averaged over an entire shift, they can expose firefighters to dangerous concentrations for short periods of time during specific activities. In addition, carbon monoxide exposures were found to be higher during prescribed burns, presumably because you feel compelled to keep the fire within the prescribed boundaries at all times, because you're really close to fire. When you're doing burning out or extinguishing hotspots in a burnout area, you're really close to it. Increasing problem of residential influx.
We also know that fires produce the most carbon monoxide when they're not free burning. So if you're controlling them, there's more smoke, and if there's more smoke,
he was
more
extinguishing
CO.
a brush pile.
That too.
So, the increasing problem of residential influx to wildland areas may cause more overexposure to smoke as firefighters feel compelled to protect the structures despite heavy smoke situations. The report goes on to say that 1,100 hours the victim was exposed to carbon monoxide during mop-up operations for about 50 minutes. And then an hour and 15 minutes later at 12:15, he was protecting a residential structure by supervising a burn pile, a small prescribed burn to reduce fuel load around the home. To control the pile, water was applied to the ground around and onto the pile. This latter activity probably increased the pile's generation of carbon monoxide smoke, like you just said, in complete combustion. He did this for about 25 minutes before the fire conditions dramatically deteriorated. In addition, the victim encountered conditions that may have increased severity of the exposure. Exertion-related increase, because he was working hard, and then the panic all of a sudden. And he did that 30 minutes at the scene and 50 minutes of mop-up, at least 12 hours during the previous shift at a high altitude, 3,800 feet. Simultaneous exposure to airborne irritants, wildfire smoke, in proximity to tailpipe exhaust from the fire truck. During the autopsy, the carbon oxyhemoglobin level of 27% was found, demonstrating significant exposure to carbon monoxide. Although it doesn't correlate well with clinical findings, the profound unconsciousness has been reported with levels less than 20%. So this could explain his confused behavior, it says. Unclear why the other members, though, didn't experience the symptoms. But, the captain had a hemoglobin of 4% only. So for some reason, the firefighter who passed away had much higher. So that's why I didn't want to go too far into this in the podcast, but definitely it is an indicator. I have had carbon monoxide poisoning from a call where we went to where one person was killed, another person was, seriously injured. The police officer who was at the scene first ended up going to the hyperbaric chamber. I was in there as well, but I wasn't as bad, but I definitely was confused and needed to take it easy for a day or two to recover. So, this happens.
Yeah. When you have carboxyhemoglobin numbers, that are above the danger line, it actually takes hours to get that out. Taking a break for an hour in rehab is not adequate. And every firefighter who fights at a fire is bound to get some smoke and some carbon monoxide, I would say, exposure. And that's a risk, particularly, like they say here, there was like 3 events, right, that added to that. So, yeah. And that was the first thing that hit my thoughts was when he was disoriented or appeared to be confused. Carbon monoxide looks like.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you everyone for listening to another emergency traffic podcast. We hope that you continue to find these informative and valuable. Please give us a like, a follow, or a comment. You can give us some feedback on whatever app you use to what you think, and we will talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Take care every day. We need to learn from others. We can't experience all these events ourselves, so it's important. Hope this helped.
I wish I would have done this one earlier, actually, because it's a good episode to learn from.